Chris, I think for this first, as a good starting point here, I think we can start with your origin story. So you have a complex background and a very interesting approach to this personal development and improvement type of mindset. So can you share us how you landed into that world and what gave you this perspective on it?
Sure. Thank you for having me on your show, and I'm happy to share my story, and with the hopes that maybe it inspires somebody to help break through to the person they hope to become. Uh, but for me, it started as a child. My mother was a heroin addict, and she was a heroin dealer. And when I was 10, I had two sisters. My sisters were 11 and 12. My mother got sent to prison for heroin, and but the day that they arrested my mother and drove her away in handcuffs, my sisters got taken away by Child Protective Services. They got sent to a girls' home, and I got sent in a different car to a boys' home. And that was really the day that I learned a lot about perspective. And, for the years following, both of my sisters, when they were still alive, if you were to ask them how their lives turned out so horribly, and their lives did turn out horribly, unfortunately, they both followed in my mother's footsteps. They both were avid drug addicts and just dealers. But if you would have looked them in the eye and asked them, how did their lives turn out to be just so terrible? They would have looked at you and they would have said, well, because my mother was a drug addict. If the same person would turn and look at me and say, Chris, your life turned out really well. You have a beautiful marriage, you've raised some great kids, you've had a lot of success in your career. How did your life turn out so great? I would say, well, that's easy. My mother was a drug dealer. So I learned at a very young age the superpower that we have called perspective. Both my sisters and I experienced the exact same thing from the same mother at the same time in our lives, very close to the same age, in the same city in Dayton, Ohio. But because we had different perspectives about that experience, it changed our trajectory of our life forever. And it was really then that I really truly understood the power of the human mind. Not just perception, how we perceive what's happening, how we perceive the circumstances, but perspective, which is our ability to choose whatever perspective we want, regardless of the circumstances, I believe is one of the most powerful gifts we have. And that is what really started me on my trajectory for the career I have today.
Did you, because I think one of those big moments when someone decides to be different, be better, it might be a sort of loneliness or disconnect to the people around them. So growing up, how do you feel in relation to your peers, for example? Because you have that insight of being able to put a different perspective over what was going on around you. So how did you relate to the people around you?
I tried to stay out of sight. I tried to stay quiet. I tried to make sure they didn't see me. Most of the adults in my life at that time were people that were in our life because they were my mother's friends, or my mother's family, or my mother's drug associates. And so none of them were good influences. They just weren't good people. They were people who didn't think there was a problem with a woman my mother's age, shooting up heroin in front of her small children. So, if you're an adult and you see an adult friend of yours shooting up heroin in front of her children, you're probably not a very good person either. And so I wasn't surrounded by people who were loving or caring or good role models. I was surrounded by people who really didn't care. And so I had learned at an early age, just be quiet and make sure that you stay out of sight. And, I didn't, one of the things I teach now as an adult is I teach the importance of setting really good boundaries. And then, once you establish those boundaries, protect those boundaries, create an environment that is conducive to the person you're trying to become, the life you want to live, and then be fierce about protecting those boundaries that protect that environment. Well, I was 10. I had no control over my environment. I had no way to, it's establish boundaries. If my mother said, get in the car, we're leaving, if she said we're moving tonight at midnight because rent's due and we don't have the money and they're going to kick us out tomorrow. So just get in the car tonight at midnight. We're going to go to so-and-so's house. Well, that's what you did. So, my heart goes out to children who are, victims of just bad things, because there's not a lot that they can do about their circumstances. But once you become an adult, once I turned 18 years old and became a legal adult in the United States, I lost my right to blame those around me. I forfeited it. It was gone. It was over. And so, at 10 and 12 and 14, I could blame my circumstances. I could blame the fact that I was a kid. I could blame the fact that I didn't have a lot of authority in my life. I didn't have any money. But at 18, you need to let that nonsense go. You can't be blaming anyone anymore.
I'm thinking maybe, we don't usually get a lot of teenagers listening to this podcast. It's usually more young adults, as in already the 20s or even the 30s. What could, from your experience, of course, what could a teenager that might be listening to this do in their, currently constrained life to have some more agency over what they do?
I would push back with maybe a different question, because maybe you don't have many teenagers listening to this, but every adult that is listening to this can probably think back to a time to when they were a teenager and they were surrounded by bad circumstances, and or they were surrounded by bad people, or they were surrounded by violence or crime or drug addiction or abuse or divorce, or infidelity. So probably every listener on this program can think back to a time when they were a teenager and they didn't have a lot of money or control or authority or independence. And I would challenge you, that you're an adult now. Let it go.
To give away that card of blame, I can blame others, to start turning it into, what can I do about this problem I have?
Yeah, I have a rule for my life, and it's a bit extreme, but I live in the extremes.
Go for it.
I don't live well in the middle. I live in the extremes. But I absolutely refuse to blame anyone for anything. And I also refuse to accept the fact that somebody owes me something. Nobody owes me anything. And wherever I'm at in my life is because of the decisions that I have made, because of the things I have chose to accept, because of the work I chose not to do, because of the forgiveness I failed to forgive or failed to give. So I always take a look at, whatever's going on in my life is on me. It's not on anybody else. And because of that mindset, I just will not blame anyone for anything. Even if somebody clearly was in the wrong. I mean, if I pull out of my neighborhood in my car and somebody runs a red light and they hit me and they destroy my car, and as a result, maybe, I'm even injured. as horrible as a scenario like that might seem, you're still never going to see me or hear me or witness me placing blame on that person. I'm not saying that someone didn't make a terrible mistake, and I'm not saying that it wasn't their fault. But what I am saying is I've come to the place where I realize that blame is not useful. It does not serve me anymore. And if something is not useful, I don't allow it in my life.
I'm really loving this so far, and purely out of curiosity, do you have any sort of go-to sentence in your mind where when something goes wrong?
Yeah, I have a quote. I have a quote from Alan Watts. He was a philosopher, British philosopher. I think he passed away in the 70s or thereabouts, but he had a quote that's one of my go-to quotes. And he said, "You are under no obligation to remain the same version of yourself you were 10 minutes ago."
That's powerful stuff. Because, for all these good conversations we can have about personal development and, people being more invested in personal development as well, there's still quite a lot of entitlement out there, or even if not entitlement, people that are stuck in their routine, just going along with the flow. What would you recommend for these people? Because, for example, they might have gone through difficult situations in their teenage years and sort of never recovered from that trauma or made the conscious decision to move over it. So what would you recommend for those people stuck?
Well, then just accept the fact that you're going to live a life that probably does not have a lot of joy and happiness. Nobody can make you forgive. Nobody can make you let go. Nobody can make you come to a place of acceptance. Like those are your choices. And you say personal development. I don't, to me, there is no such thing as personal development. There's just development. All development is personal. If I go out and I try to improve the life of a young teenager who's in a terrible position, well, in me reaching out and trying to throw down the rope and help that teenager, well, isn't that personally developing myself?
Yeah, at the same time, it's you and the teenager.
Absolutely. Whether I'm trying to help society, help a stranger, help a loved one, a family member, help one of my own kids, whether I'm trying to help my wife, through a difficult time at work, whether I'm trying to help myself or help a stranger or help a friend or help a family member, it's all development, because anything I put out there is going to come back to me. So all development is personal.
That's a really fantastic reframing because, personal development is by definition very personal and very egotistical, even because you're thinking of the self. But taking that approach of working in service of others, that working part is actually developing you as you go through it.
If I grow me, that's personal development. If I grow you, that's personal development. If I grow a total stranger, that's personal development. And you could also substitute the word development with destruction. If I try to hurt you, that's personal destruction. If I try to hurt a stranger, that's personal destruction. So look, whatever you put out there is going to come back to you.
That's the real karma.
It is the real karma. It's a principle. And look, this is a godly principle. I mean, it's like a universal principle. It's like gravity, and it's the principle of sowing and reaping. That's a principle. If you sow a seed, you will reap a harvest. Now, it doesn't really get into, but what kind of seed was it? Was it a weed? Was it a poison? Was it a drug? Was it a fruit or a vegetable or a crop? It's a principle of sowing and reaping, just like the principle of gravity. If I step out of, a third story building off the balcony and I fall, 9.8 meters per second squared is going to pull me down just as fast as it pulls down a couch or a lamp, or it's a principle, and it holds true no matter what we throw off that balcony. And so I would tell people that, whatever you put out there, it's going to come back to you one way or the other. So you might as well be putting out the good stuff. And it's why I absolutely refuse to blame. I just will not blame. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I let people off the hook and, and I excuse, bad behavior. I mean, I stand up for myself. I know how to, believe me, I know how to stand up for myself. But there's a time to deal with it, and then there's a time to let it go, and then there's a time to move on. What I'm not saying is that I won't ever grab onto that stuff and process it. But what I am saying is you're not going to see me pulling it around in a wagon 20 years from now.
One thing I'd like to hear your thoughts on is precisely at that point of blame and letting go. So, what's your process in your mind when someone wrongs you, for example? How do you deal with that such precisely that you don't hold a grudge against them?
Well, you have to understand the root of blame. The root of blame is our ego. So if you have someone who refuses to take accountability for their actions, that's ego. If you have someone who, when you call them on their mistakes, and they make excuses are ego. So the avoidance of circumstance, not circumstances, consequences. Someone who tries to avoid consequences, someone who rejects feedback, somebody who refuses to be, reprimanded or corrected. All of this comes from the ego. So if you have someone who, just full of blame, full of excuses, full of denial, just know those are all issues that stem from our ego. And if you want to know what the ego is, here we'll do a little, we'll help the audience understand what ego is. Give me a sentence, any sentence you want, but in your sentence, I want you to use the word I.
I am looking forward to the long weekend.
Okay. The I in that sentence is your ego. Anytime we use the word I, it's our ego talking. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, and I'm not saying it's good, but I am helping you understand how dominant your ego is in your life. Anytime you say, oh my gosh, I'm cold. Oh my gosh, it's so hot in here. I am really uncomfortable. I think I want to get up and walk. Anytime you hear someone using the word I, or you're using it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, just understand the word I is your ego speaking. And now you know who your ego is, and you know how often your ego has a voice. And, there's a book out there, and it's a very good book. So I'm by no means criticizing it. I thought it was a very good book. But the book is called it's called Ego is the Enemy. And although I agree with a lot of the concepts in the book, and I think the author did a great job, I don't agree with the title. Because I don't believe ego is the enemy. I believe ego can be the enemy, but that doesn't mean it is always the enemy. And so whether ego is your ally or your enemy is up to you.
This is real interesting because on one hand, you can almost judge how much a person is putting their ego into their way of being by how frequently they use the word I or frame their wording around me. And on the other hand, you're also stating a very important thing, that ego can be the enemy, sure, but can also be your ally. How
Well,
do
it's
you
like
go about
fear.
making the ego your ally?
Well, it's like fear. Fear can be one of our greatest allies, and fear can also be one of our greatest enemies. And so if I'm dealing with fear, I have to immediately determine, is this fear my ally or is this fear my enemy? And the way that I do that, so in other words, is this good fear that is here to serve me and help me, or is this bad fear that's here to hold me back or cause me to fail? And so the first question I ask is the fear that I'm dealing with right now, is it rational or is it irrational? Because irrational fear is always the enemy. Okay. So that's the first question I ask is this fear rational or irrational? And what makes it an irrational fear is if it's something that has a very low likelihood of happening. So if, let's just say you have a fear of flying, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so you get on an airplane and you're just holding onto the handles on the sides of the seats, the armrest, and you're just like, oh my gosh, and you're breathing heavily and I can't get off this airplane quick enough. Well, that's an irrational fear if you just go Google the statistics of, you dying in a plane crash. I mean, your chances of dying in a car accident are significantly higher. So the fact that you're scared of or afraid or frightened or fearful of dying in a plane crash, that's an actual irrational fear, just simply because it has a low probability of happening. Okay. But if you're afraid of checking your luggage because the airline might lose your luggage, well, that's actually a rational fear, because statistically, the chances of them losing your luggage, or you going weeks or hours or days or whatever, when you get to where you're going and you still don't have your luggage and you're waiting for some van to knock on your hotel room door at 2 a.m. with your luggage, well, that's a legitimate fear. So one thing you have to ask is it an irrational fear or is it rational? And if it has a very low likelihood of happening, well, that's irrational. But there's another thing that makes a fear irrational, which means it's no longer our ally. It's now our enemy. Okay. And that is, you have to look at what the core function of fear is. One, it's to protect us. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And either from ourselves or from others or from circumstances. But fear is also designed to motivate us. And there's very few things that motivate us like fear. Fear of loss is a tremendous motivator, and actual data proves that if you look at the two greatest drivers in human motivation, okay, one is our fear of loss, but then our other is our desire for gain. Okay, so out of the two, our fear of loss is significantly more frequent in our life throughout the course of the day than our desire for gain. But so one of the things you have to ask it, like, is this an irrational fear? If my fear is not motivating me to take an action that could possibly change the impact or the outcome that I'm afraid of. So let's say I'm afraid of losing my home. Like I've had a hard time keeping a job. I have money that's owed to me that's not been paid to me. I'm a couple months behind on my rent or my mortgage, and I've gotten multiple phone calls or letters from the bank or the landlord. And if I don't come up with some money quick, I'm going to have to leave my home. Okay. So what action are you taking to help prevent that from happening? What action are you taking to change that outcome? Because if you're afraid of losing your home, but you sit around all day watching Netflix and playing video games, well, that's a worthless fear, because it's not serving you, because it's not motivating you to take action to change the outcome. So it's a worthless fear. So one of the things that you have to ask yourself is, what is it that I'm afraid of? What's my fear in the situation? Because fear is almost always present. I mean, it's just always hanging around. Um, but then you have to ask, is this fear rational or is it irrational? And if it's rational, what steps am I taking to change the outcome? And if the answer is it's an irrational fear, and even if it was rational, it wouldn't matter because I'm not doing anything to change the outcome. Well, the problem then is not fear. The problem is you.
I think we have a lot to unpack here because right at the definition between irrational and rational fear, both of them seem to have a common denominator, which is lack of information. So, for example, taking up the airplane example, the irrational fear, oh, am I going to die in this airplane? It's lack of information about actually airplanes are safe, statistically speaking. And on the other hand, the losing the luggage is the lack of information of, is this airport good? Are they going to lose my luggage? And at the same time, on the transitioning from irrational to rational fear, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, I think it circles back to that perspective conversation. Because going to lose the house because I don't have a job and I choose to go play games, it's the perspective of, I can't do anything about it. It's a done deal. But actually, if you shift your perspective, you can choose to go look for a job, apply for a new job, do literally anything you can so you don't actually lose the house in the end. Is that a fair statement to say that we can turn around fear based on perspective?
Sure, absolutely, it's a very fair statement, and it's accurate. But if I say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and play video games and watch Netflix because there's really nothing I can do about changing the probability of losing my home, well, I would say that's ridiculous. Because one of the greatest things you can do, if you want your fortune to change, if you want your luck to change, if you want your circumstances to change, whatever you call it, okay, I can tell you this: luck loves it when it finds us working. So maybe, putting down the remote control to the Xbox and turning off the TV, yeah, maybe directly it's not going to affect you keeping your home. But indirectly it will, because if you put that stuff away and you decide to go out and apply for jobs or do odd jobs, whatever it takes, just anything other than sitting around and doing nothing, I will tell you that you make it very easy for luck and fortune and fate to find you.
I think we can almost put it in a way that to make that irrational fear your ally, you need to take any action that increases the chances of that thing you're afraid of not happening.
Let's imagine for a moment that you have the ability to just randomly be a blessing to someone. You have the ability to just walk up to a stranger and just hand them $100 and just say, here, I feel it like it's on my heart to give you this. It's a gift. You don't know me. I don't know you, but it's just a gift. And you don't owe this back to me. And so you're walking around, in whatever the local city to wherever you live is. And you got this $100 and you're not going back home until you've given this $100 to someone. And you come across two people, one who's outside working hard in the heat in manual labor and just sweat pouring off of them. And your other choice is someone who is taking a nap under a shaded tree. All right. They're in the shade, taking a nap under the tree while everyone around them is working. It's going to be a pretty obvious choice on which of those two you're going to give the $100 to, right?
Yep.
Well, I think fate is the same. I think luck is the same. I think fortune is the same. If it's out there, if fate and luck and fortune are out there walking up and down the streets looking for someone to bless, someone that they can be useful to, don't let them catch you sleeping under the shade tree.
It's a really amazing way to visualize luck. Yeah, I'm just sitting with that for a moment because, yeah, it's really good. Because you sometimes might hear the let's say definition of do it so many times that it becomes unlikely you will fail. And it directly ties to your imagery of you do it so many times so that the one time luck passes by, it sees you working and it hands you the $100 bill.
That's very good. And then I would add one more thing to that. Change your definition of failure. By changing your definition of failure, you cannot fail. So for me, the only way I fail is if I let fear cause me to not begin in the first place. If I choose not to take that first step, if I choose not to take that risk because of fear, well, then that's failure. All right. But if I start and I see it to the end, no matter what happens, then I cannot fail. So my definition of failure is I either refuse to start because of my fear, or when I did start, I quit early because it was just too damn hard. That's failure. But if I start and I fall 100 times and I never cross the finish line, but I never quit, it just didn't work out. So from my perspective, I cannot fail. I either will win or I will learn. Those are the only two possible outcomes. So by changing my definition of failure, I now can't fail.
I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on knowing when to quit.
For me, and everyone's different, but my wife is the love of my life. We've been married for 30 years. I met her on a blind date, and immediately on that blind date, I knew she was the one. 2 weeks later, I proposed to her, and 10 weeks later, we were married. And we've been married for 30 years. And so for me, here is when I quit. It's not easy to get me to quit. I am a very difficult person to get to quit. But for me, if I continue on this path and I don't quit and I don't let this go, my wife is the one who will suffer the consequences. Not me, my wife. I quit. If it's me, you're not getting me to quit. But if it's my wife, I surrender. And just to give you an example, 4 weeks ago, I had, for the first time in my life, I had a seizure. I didn't even really know what a seizure was. I mean, I've seen them like on TV and movies. But 4 weeks ago, I had a seizure. And my wife walked into the kitchen. She came home from work a little early that day, and she walked into the kitchen and she saw me almost dead, lying on the kitchen floor. I wasn't breathing. She called 911. And while 911 was on the way, she had to consistently give me CPR. And she got me breathing again just long enough for the ambulance to get here. And then they put me on a machine and got me breathing. through tubes and all that. And they got me to the hospital. They did an MRI and they realized I had a large tumor in my brain. And they immediately scheduled me for surgery. And then a 6.5-hour surgery later, they successfully removed the tumor. And it wasn't cancerous. So, it's done. They found it. They found the reason for the seizure. They immediately did surgery. They removed it. It's all gone. The biopsy came back. I'm good to go. Now I'm having to learn how to talk again. I'm having to learn how to stand without losing my balance. I'm having to walk with a cane. But every morning I get up and I do the work. We have a granddaughter, and because of my granddaughter, we have a bunch of little children's books in our house. And I get up in the morning and I read these 3-year-old, these books for 3-year-olds. And I read them out loud. And I do it every morning to learn how to say my S's again and to learn how to speak again. And then I walk in the neighborhood, and then I go to the gym and I lift really light weights, like 5 pounds. And now I'm walking without the cane. And now I'm doing podcast interviews again. And I'm speaking, even though I'm not speaking as clearly as I am used to speaking. I'm a professional keynote speaker. I speak for a living. I speak for money. I've spoken in over 60 countries. And now I'm having to retrain myself how to speak. And I don't tell you that story to impress you, but I do tell you that story to impress upon you. I'm not a person who takes quitting lightly. If I took quitting lightly, you would have got an email from me canceling this podcast. I'm sorry, I had a health issue. I'm not really okay, we would have canceled this. Or I would be canceling it again for the second or third time. Hey, I'm still not able to speak properly. And I would have done all of these things to rearrange my life to where my life waited for my recovery. Now, look, I should be resting and I should be doing all of the things that I need to do to recover. But there's also things that I need to be doing to heal. Okay, resting is important. Following the doctor's orders are important. I asked the doctor, can I go to the gym? And he laughed at me and said, well, technically you can, but you can't lift more than 10 pounds. Okay. So I go to the gym and I lift 10 pounds. But I tell you this story to tell you that I don't take quitting lightly. And if I did, I wouldn't be on this call with you right now. I wouldn't be struggling to find my words. So when we talk about quitting, I'm telling you that for me, where I draw the line is when the cost of not quitting now spills over. The consequences of not quitting spills over to the ones that I love the most. Because I'm fine. I'll take all the pain you can muster. But I'm not going to let it spill over to my loved ones. Not one moment.
Well, Chris, I think you're an absolute force of nature because it's abundantly clear nothing can stop you, honestly. Because if that health situation couldn't stop you, I don't know what can. And even, we've been speaking for like 40 minutes or something at this point. Even in this short few weeks that have passed since your situation, you're incredibly coherent. It's very fluid, your discourse. Like, kudos to you, man. You've been doing an amazing, post-surgery recovery work. Your patient work ethic has been amazing at the very least.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I take that as a very authentic compliment. It means a lot.
Like, gentlemen, thank you very much for honoring the commitment. I would have completely understood if you canceled, but not only did you not cancel, you also showed up in amazing form.
Thank you. You know, the subconscious mind is a very powerful force. And when we talk about mindset, the importance of having mental toughness, the importance of having a right mindset, which is what I teach as a keynote speaker. My books, I've written many books. A lot of my books are about mindset. But when we talk about mindset, what we're really talking about is the subconscious mind. Because our conscious mind, which really only drives about 5% of our daily decisions, activities, responses, reactions, only about 5% come from the analytical mind, the conscious mind. 95% is pretty much automated. Like right now, you're blinking, you're breathing, you're holding your bladder. I mean, all of this stuff is done without your permission. It's all done subconsciously. And so when we talk about mindset, I want to change my mindset. I want to improve my mindset. I want to be more mentally tough. Well, the reason most people fail, like for example, they try to break an old habit, but they just end up going back to the way they were before. Or they try to create a new habit and it doesn't stick. I'm going to go to the gym every day. Well, 3 weeks later, the gym is empty. Or I'm going to change these limiting beliefs, or I'm going to change these biases that I have that they're just not useful to me anymore. All of those changes have to happen in the subconscious mind, but yet we make them in the conscious mind. We get a little bit of motivation. We call it willpower. We call it, I'm very enthusiastic or inspired, but that all fades. It's like going to the carnival and buying cotton candy. I mean, it looks good. It smells delicious. It tastes wonderful, but it has zero nutritional value. And in 5 minutes from now, you're hungry again. Well, that's what happens when you try to make changes in your life, in your conscious mind. It's as if you're just eating cotton candy. Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, said this: until you can make the unconscious or subconscious mind conscious, he said, it will continue to control your life, and you will call it fate.
Now that you've mentioned Jung, I'd like to ask, because everything we've discussed so far, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you don't go about life with an agenda. Like, you're very upfront about who you are and how you act towards others. What are your thoughts in terms of that shadow self that sometimes it's discussed with Jung?
My shadow self is not a very good person. My shadow self was born in adversity. My shadow self was raised in rejection. And I know my shadow self, and he's not a very good person. I wouldn't hang out with him. He's mean, he's nasty, and he's ugly. He's self-serving, and quite frankly, under the right circumstances, he could be dangerous. But I accept that. I acknowledge that. I'm aware of that. But my shadow self works for me. He answers to me. I'm in control. He's not in control. I've let him be in control a few times in my life, briefly, and it never ends well for anyone. So I have decided that my shadow self is the stallion, and I am the rider, and I am the one that is holding the reins, and if need be, the whip. But I will never be slave or victim to my shadow self. I understand him. I respect him. I'm not going to take him lightly, but he is here to serve me, and I will never serve him.
I think if there's something we can take away from this conversation is that if someone in life can do it, you are 100% in control of your mind.
Well, if I'm not, then who is?
Right.
I would like to have that meeting. If I'm not 100% in control of these things, then point me to who is. I need to meet him or her immediately so that I can take my control back.
I gotta ask, do you still feel
I would say, take me to my leader. I have words.
do you think this all stems from that perspective shift?
No, I think it. I think some of it does, but I think everything begins with acceptance and awareness. You know, nothing changes. Nothing changes until you have to be aware of what needs to change. Like if you're not aware of what needs to change, nothing's going to change. And once you become aware of what needs to change, then you have to accept the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm very aware of my shadow self. I don't run from him. I don't hide from him. I don't ignore him. I don't make excuses for him. So that's awareness. But then I also come to a place of acceptance. And the acceptance is keeping him in his place is 100% my responsibility. In other words, somebody says something mean or hurtful to me or disrespectful to me does not give me permission or the right to unleash my shadow self on you. Well, I'm sorry that I hurt you, but it's really your fault because you pushed me. No. My shadow self and how he responds or reacts to his circumstances is 100% my responsibility. And I never get to blame my poor choices, my accidents, or my mistakes on him. Because at the end of the day, I'm the rider. He is simply the horse.
It's absolutely fantastic how you refuse to yield any of your agency to anyone or anything, even if it's yourself.
Especially when it's myself.
There was one really great sentence that stuck with me going through your website that I'd like to get your live thoughts on, if you will, which was either master yourself or be defeated by your rivals.
Yeah, so we all have rivals. And this is where awareness starts off the conversation of transformation and change. I would encourage anyone to write down what you think your greatest rivals are. Are they fear? Are they doubt? Are they laziness? Are they pride? Are they procrastination? Are they blame? Are they lack of accountability? Are they ego? It doesn't matter what the answer is, as long as you stand up and acknowledge these are the greatest rivals in my life. These are the rivals that are preventing me from transforming into the person I have the potential of becoming. And that's where awareness comes in. If you don't get real with yourself, if you don't get honest with yourself and acknowledge these are my greatest rivals, they have been for a very long time, and it's about time that I conquer them. Well, you're not going to conquer them until you call them out by name. I know my rivals, but I will tell you that my rivals that I battle with today are not the same rivals I battled with 3 years ago. My rivals from 3 years ago, I acknowledged them and I defeated them. And now I have different rivals. And now I'm working on them. You will always have rivals. In fact, I don't know that I would want a life with no rivals. Because without struggle, where's growth?
I'd probably go as far as to say that if you don't find rivals, you're not looking hard enough.
Yeah, that's true. Or you're not looking at all.
Or not looking at all. So, Chris, as we approach the end of the conversation, it's, after this, people will be keenly interested in learning more about you and learning about this mindset and, ultimately how to apply it to themselves. So before we sign off and, provide ways to reach out to you, what would you recommend to be the next step that people take to start taking that control for themselves?
Get out a piece of paper, get an ink pen, not a pencil. You want to write this down in ink. And I want you to write down the list of the greatest rivals standing between you and the person you would like to become. Write them down. And then I would ask that you go find someone who knows you really well and show them your list. And say, hey, as someone who cares about me, as someone who has known me for a long time, am I missing any?
Oh, it's amazing. And, after that, where can people find you? How can people connect with you?
TheWarriorMaker.com. TheWarriorMaker.com.
The one-stop shop for everything Chris Aries?
Yep. Books, keynotes, videos, it's all right there. Or just Google The Warrior Maker.
Fantastic, Chris. And we'll leave all the links for that in the description as well. So it's a one click away for everyone.
Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed the conversation. And I wish you nothing but continued success.
Thanks, Chris. Likewise. It was a huge pleasure to speak with someone that not even in the face of health adversity can be stopped.
We are more powerful than we will ever realize in our lifetime.
Thank you very much, Chris.
All right.
Cheers all.